The wedding dress lay crumpled and stained across the wooden pew like a discarded dream, and within its ivory folds, a young woman slept so deeply that she did not stir when the church door opened and heavy boots echoed across the floorboards. Owen Xavier had ridden through the night to reach Mojave, California by dawn, his body aching from 3 days in the saddle and his throat parched from desert dust. The year was 1882, and the small mining town had seen better days, but the white-painted church still stood at the edge of the settlement like a beacon of civilization in the harsh Mojave landscape. He had come seeking water for his horse, and perhaps a moment of quiet before continuing his journey to his brother's ranch in Nevada. But what he found instead stopped him cold in the doorway. The woman lay curled on her side, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, her dark auburn hair spilling across the pew in tangled waves that caught the early morning light streaming through the simple glass windows. The dress she wore had once been beautiful, he could tell that much, with delicate lace at the collar and pearl buttons down the back. But now it was torn at the hem and marked with dirt, and what looked like dried blood on one sleeve. Her face, even in sleep, bore the evidence of tears, and there was a bruise forming along her jaw that made Owen's own jaw tighten with anger at whoever had put it there. He stood there for a long moment, weighing his options. The decent thing would be to wake her gently, make sure she was not injured beyond what he could see, and help her find wherever she belonged. But something about the scene before him, the abandoned wedding dress, the tears, the bruises, told him that perhaps she had nowhere to belong anymore, or perhaps nowhere she wanted to be. Owen removed his hat and moved quietly down the aisle, his spurs making soft chiming sounds that seemed too loud in the sacred silence. When he reached her pew, he knelt down on one knee, bringing himself to her level, and spoke softly. Miss, are you all right?" She did not stir. He tried again, a little louder this time. "Miss, can you hear me?" Still nothing. Concerned now that she might be more seriously hurt than he had thought, Owen reached out and gently touched her shoulder. The moment his fingers made contact, her eyes flew open, wild and terrified, green as spring grass and just as startling in the muted colors of the desert church. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against the back of the pew, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "Easy now," Owen said, holding up both hands to show he meant no harm. "I am not going to hurt you. I just came in for some water and found you here." The woman stared at him, her eyes darting from his face to the door and back again, clearly calculating whether she could run. But something in his expression must have reassured her, because the panic slowly faded from her features, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. "I am sorry," she said, her voice rough and cracked from crying or thirst or both. "I did not mean to fall asleep here. I will leave." She tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her, and Owen caught her elbow, steadying her. Up close, he could see that she was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with delicate features and a graceful neck that the torn collar of her dress had exposed. She was beautiful, even disheveled and frightened as she was, but it was the look in her eyes that struck him most. It was the look of someone who had lost everything and was trying desperately to figure out what came next. "Have you no home?" Owen asked quietly, still kneeling beside her as she sat back down heavily on the pew. The question seemed to break something inside her. Her face crumpled, and tears began to slide down her cheeks, though she made no sound. She shook her head slowly, as if the motion cost her everything she had left. "I did," she whispered. "Or I thought I did, but I cannot go back there, I cannot." Owen felt something shift in his chest, some protective instinct he had not known he possessed rising up fierce and immediate. He had seen plenty of trouble in his 30 years, had dealt with claim jumpers and cattle thieves and men who thought they could take whatever they wanted. But this was different. This was a woman alone in a wedding dress with nowhere to go, and everything in him rebelled at the thought of simply walking away. "What is your name?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment, as if debating whether to tell him the truth. "Amelia," she finally said. "Amelia Fletcher." "Well, Miss Fletcher, I am Owen Xavier, and I think maybe we should get you some water and some food, and then you can tell me what happened if you want to. But first, let me ask you this. Are you in danger? Is someone going to come looking for you who means you harm?" Amelia's eyes widened slightly and she glanced toward the door again. "I do not know," she admitted. "Maybe he was very angry when I ran." Owen felt that anger tighten in his chest again. "Your husband, almost," she said bitterly. "It was supposed to be my wedding day, yesterday. But I could not do it. I could not marry him, so I ran, and I have been running ever since." She looked down at the ruined dress, plucking at the torn lace with trembling fingers. "I do not even know why I kept the dress on. I suppose I had nothing else to wear, and I thought maybe if I looked like a bride, people would pity me and help me. But no one did. They all just stared." Owen made a decision then, one that would change both their lives, though he could not have known it at the time. "Can you ride?" he asked. Amelia looked up at him, confused. "I used to. My father had horses before he died." "Why?" "Because I have a horse outside and a brother with a ranch about 2 days' ride north of here, across the state line in Nevada. It is not much, but it is safe, and his wife Mary is a good woman who would not turn away someone in need. If you want, I can take you there. You can rest, get your bearings, figure out what you want to do next." "Why would you do that?" Amelia asked, her voice thick with suspicion and hope in equal measure. "You do not even know me." Owen stood up and offered her his hand. "Because I was raised to help people who need helping, and because nobody should have to sleep in a church because they have nowhere else to go. And because that bruise on your jaw tells me that maybe running away was the smartest thing you ever did." Amelia stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment, and Owen could see the war playing out behind her eyes. Trust had clearly been broken for her recently, and badly. But finally, slowly, she reached out and placed her small, calloused hand in his larger one. Her grip was stronger than he had expected, the hand of someone who had worked hard in her life, not some pampered socialite. "All right," she said quietly. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier." "Owen," he corrected. "If we are going to be traveling together, you should call me Owen." He helped her to her feet, and this time her legs held, though she swayed slightly. He could tell she had not eaten in a while and probably had not had much water either. The Mojave Desert in September was unforgiving, even as autumn began to cool the worst of the summer heat. The days were still brutally hot, and anyone without proper provisions would suffer quickly. "Wait here," he told her. "I have some jerky and a canteen in my saddlebags. Let me get them, and you can eat something before we set out. And I should probably find you something else to wear. That dress is going to be hard to ride in, and it makes you too easy to spot if anyone is looking." Amelia nodded gratefully, and Owen headed back outside into the bright morning sun. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, was tied to the hitching post, drinking deeply from the trough that someone kept filled behind the church. Owen patted the animal's neck affectionately and retrieved his saddlebags, pulling out the dried meat and hardtack he had been living on for the past few days, along with his spare shirt and an old pair of canvas trousers he had meant to patch but never gotten around to. When he returned to the church, Amelia was standing by one of the windows, looking out at the dusty street beyond. The town was beginning to wake up, and he could see a few early risers making their way to the general store or the assay office. Mojave was not a large town, perhaps 200 people at most, surviving on the thin trickle of silver still being pulled from the nearby hills, and the even thinner trickle of travelers passing through on their way to somewhere else. "Here," Owen said, handing her the canteen. "Drink slowly. Your stomach will not thank you if you gulp it down." Amelia took the canteen with shaking hands and did as he instructed, taking small, careful sips. He could see her throat working as she swallowed, see the relief that washed over her face as the water eased her thirst. When she had drunk her fill, he handed her the jerky and hardtack. "It is not much," he apologized, "but it will keep you going until we can get a proper meal." "It is more than I have had since yesterday morning," Amelia said, tearing into the jerky with an appetite that spoke of real hunger. She ate quickly but not greedily, chewing thoroughly and swallowing before taking another bite. Good manners, even in desperation. That told Owen something about how she had been raised. While she ate, he held up the clothes he had brought. "These are going to be too big for you, but they will be better than that dress for riding. There is a room in the back where the pastor probably keeps his vestments. You can change there." Amelia looked at the men's clothes with a mixture of relief and embarrassment. "Thank you," she said softly. "I know this must seem very strange to you." "I have seen stranger," Owen lied, trying to put her at ease. The truth was, this was probably the strangest morning he had ever experienced, but he saw no reason to make her feel worse about it. She disappeared into the back room, and Owen used the time to check his supplies and think through their route. 2 days to his brother's ranch if they pushed hard, maybe 3 if they took it easy. They would need to stop for water at the way station at Cactus Springs, about halfway there, and they would have to travel mostly in the early morning and evening to avoid the worst of the daytime heat. It would not be comfortable, especially riding double on Copper, but the horse was strong and well rested. They would manage. When Amelia emerged, Owen had to suppress a smile. The clothes swallowed her tiny frame, the shirt hanging nearly to her knees and the trousers bunched up around her waist where she had tied them with a piece of rope she must have found in the back room. She had torn strips from the underskirt of her wedding dress and wrapped them around her feet, having apparently lost her shoes at some point during her flight. Her hair was still wild and tangled, but she had attempted to braid it back from her face. "I know I look ridiculous," she said, a hint of defiance in her voice as if daring him to laugh at her. "You look like someone ready to travel," Owen said diplomatically. "Come on. We should get going before too many people are up and about. The fewer questions we have to answer, the better." They left the church together, Amelia staying close to his side as if afraid to stray too far from the protection he offered. Owen untied Copper and checked the cinch on his saddle, then turned to Amelia. "Have you ridden double before?" he asked. She shook her head. "Never." "All right. I am going to mount up first, and then I am going to pull you up behind me. You are going to need to hold on tight, especially when we start moving." "Can you do that?" Amelia nodded, her face pale but determined. Owen swung himself up into the saddle with easy grace born of a lifetime on horseback, then reached down for her. She grasped his forearm, and he lifted her as if she weighed nothing, settling her behind him on Copper's broad back. She hesitated for just a moment before wrapping her arms around his waist, her body pressed against his back. "Ready?" he asked, trying to ignore the strange feeling of having her so close, the scent of her hair, which somehow still smelled faintly of roses despite everything she had been through. "Ready," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. Owen guided Copper out onto the main street, heading north out of town at a steady walk. A few people were out now, and he felt their curious stares following them, but no one called out or tried to stop them. Once they cleared the last of the buildings and hit the open desert, He urged Copper into an easy lope, eating up the miles between them and Mojave, as the sun climbed higher in the endless blue sky. They rode in silence for a long time, the only sounds the rhythmic thud of Copper's hooves on the hard, packed earth, and the whisper of wind through the scattered sagebrush and creosote bushes that dotted the landscape. Owen could feel Amelia's grip tighten whenever Copper's gait changed or when they had to navigate around rocks or dry washes, but she did not complain, did not ask to stop. She was tougher than she looked, he realized. Whatever had happened to her, it had not broken her spirit, only bent it. As the sun reached its zenith and the heat became oppressive, Owen guided Copper toward a small outcropping of rocks that provided a bit of shade. They needed to rest the horse and get out of the direct sun for a while, or they would all suffer for it. "We will stop here for a few hours," he said, helping Amelia down from the horse. "Let the worst of the heat pass before we continue." Amelia nodded gratefully and immediately sank down into the shade of the largest rock, her face flushed and damp with sweat. Owen unsaddled Copper and rubbed the horse down, then spread his bedroll out for Amelia to sit on. He handed her the canteen again, and she drank deeply this time, past the point of being careful. "Thank you," she said for what felt like the 100th time. "I know I keep saying it, but I mean it. I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along." Owen settled himself against a rock a respectful distance away, tipping his hat down over his eyes. "You want to tell me what happened?" he asked. "Who was this man you were supposed to marry?" Amelia was quiet for so long that Owen thought she might not answer. But finally she spoke, her voice low and hollow. "His name is Gerald Thornton. He owns a large spread east of Mojave, raises cattle and horses. My father worked for him as his foreman for 10 years before he died last winter of pneumonia. My mother died when I was born, so it was always just the two of us, my father and me. When he got sick, Mr. Thornton paid for the doctor, paid for the medicine, even though in the end it did not help." She paused, plucking at the 2 long sleeves of Owen's shirt. "After Papa died, Mr. Thornton said I could stay on at the ranch, work in the house helping his housekeeper. I was grateful. I had nowhere else to go, no other family. But then, about 3 months ago, he started paying more attention to me. He would find excuses to talk to me, to be alone with me. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it, or maybe he was just being kind because of my father. But then he asked me to marry him. And you said yes." Owen asked, though he could already guess the answer. "What choice did I have?" Amelia said bitterly. "He made it clear that if I refused, I would have to leave the ranch. I had no money, no skills beyond keeping house and riding horses. I thought maybe it would not be so bad. He is not an old man, only 35, and he has always been decent to his workers. But as the wedding got closer, he started to change. He became possessive, controlling. He did not like me talking to the other ranch hands. He did not want me going into town unless he went with me. And then, 2 nights ago, I heard him talking to one of his friends, and he said things about me that made my skin crawl. Talking about how he had finally gotten his prize, how he had wanted me since I was 16 but had to wait until my father was out of the way." Owen felt his hands curl into fists. "He waited for your father to die." "That is what it sounded like," Amelia said, tears streaming down her face now. "And I realized that I could not marry him. I could not spend the rest of my life with a man who had spoken about me like that, who had seen me as property to be acquired. So yesterday morning, when I was supposed to be getting ready for the wedding, I put on the dress, and then I ran. I took one of the horses from the stable and just rode. I did not know where I was going, I just knew I had to get away. And he followed you, he must have. I rode for hours, and the horse went lame about 10 miles outside Mojave. I had to leave him at a farm and continue on foot. By the time I reached the town, it was dark, and I was terrified that Gerald would find me. The church was the only place still open, and I thought maybe I could hide there until morning, figure out what to do. But I was so tired, I just collapsed, and the next thing I knew, you were waking me up. Owen was silent for a long moment, processing everything she had told him. "This Thornton," he said finally. "Is he the kind of man who would come looking for you? Is he dangerous?" Amelia hesitated. "I do not know. He has a temper, I know that much, and he does not like losing. But whether he would actually hurt me, I honestly cannot say. I just know I could not take the chance." "Well, you do not have to worry about it now," Owen said firmly. "We will get you to my brother's ranch and you will be safe there. And if Thornton does come looking, he will have to go through me and my brother both, and I do not think he will like those odds." Amelia gave him a watery smile. "Why are you doing this? Really? I am a stranger to you, and I have brought nothing but trouble." Owen tipped his hat back and looked at her directly. "My mama raised me and my brother by herself after our father died when I was 10. She worked her fingers to the bone, keeping us fed and clothed and educated, and she taught us that the measure of a man is how he treats people who cannot help him in return. You needed help, and I could give it. It is as simple as that." It was not quite that simple, of course. Owen could admit, at least to himself, that there was something about Amelia Fletcher that had gotten under his skin the moment he saw her sleeping in that church. Something about her vulnerability and her strength all tangled up together. Something about the way she looked at him with those green eyes that seemed to see right through him. But those were thoughts for later, when they were safely at the ranch, and she had had time to recover from her ordeal. They rested through the worst of the afternoon heat, and Owen dozed lightly while Amelia lay on his bedroll, staring up at the cloudless sky. When the sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and pink and purple, Owen saddled Copper again, and they set out once more. As the miles passed beneath them and the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Owen felt Amelia's grip on his waist loosen as exhaustion overtook her. Her head drooped against his back, and he could feel the steady rhythm of her breathing as she fell asleep sitting upright behind him. He slowed Copper to a walk, not wanting to jostle her awake, and continued on through the night, guided by the stars and the familiar landmarks that told him they were heading in the right direction. They reached Cactus Springs just before dawn, a collection of rough buildings clustered around the spring that gave the place its name. Owen roused Amelia gently, and they stopped long enough to refill their canteens and buy some bread and cheese from the cantankerous old woman who ran the way station. She eyed them suspiciously, taking in Amelia's oversized clothes and the fact that they were traveling together unchaperoned, but she took Owen's money readily enough and did not ask questions. As they rode out again into the pale light of early morning, Amelia spoke for the first time in hours. "How much farther?" she asked. "If we push hard, we can make it by nightfall," Owen told her, "but if you need to rest more, we can take another day." "No," Amelia said firmly. "I want to get there. I want to feel safe again." So they rode on, through the morning and into the afternoon, crossing from California into Nevada as the landscape gradually shifted from flat desert to rolling hills dotted with juniper and pinyon pine. By the time the sun was setting again, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Owen could see the familiar outline of his brother's ranch in the valley below them. "There," he said, pointing. "That is the ranch." Amelia lifted her head from where it had been resting against his shoulder and looked where he was pointing. The ranch was modest but well kept, a sturdy log house surrounded by corrals and outbuildings, with a barn and a windmill spinning lazily in the evening breeze. Smoke rose from the chimney, a promise of warmth and food and safety. As they rode down the slope toward the ranch, the front door opened and a tall man stepped out onto the porch, shading his eyes against the setting sun. He was followed by a woman in a simple calico dress, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Owen," the man called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "Is that you?" "It is me, Caleb," Owen called back, using his brother's name, "and I have brought a guest." Caleb Xavier was 2 years younger than Owen, but he stood a few inches taller, with the same dark hair and blue eyes that ran in their family. He had settled in Nevada 5 years ago with his wife Mary, buying this small ranch with money he had saved working as a ranch hand throughout his 20s. It was a hard life, but a good one, and Owen had always envied his brother's contentment. As they rode into the yard, Caleb came down off the porch, his face curious and welcoming. Mary followed more slowly, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. She was expecting their first child, Owen remembered, due sometime in the next few months. "Owen, what in the world?" Caleb said as Owen pulled Copper to a stop. "We were not expecting you for another week." "Plans changed," Owen said, swinging down from the saddle. He reached up to help Amelia down and she slid into his arms, her legs wobbling slightly after 2 days of riding. He steadied her, then turned to his brother and sister-in-law. "Caleb, Mary, this is Amelia Fletcher. She needed help, and I am hoping you can provide her a safe place to stay for a while." Mary stepped forward immediately, her kind face full of concern as she took in Amelia's disheveled appearance and exhausted expression. "Of course," she said warmly. "You poor dear, you look done in. Come inside, let me get you some proper food and a place to wash up." Amelia looked at Owen uncertainly, as if afraid to leave his side after 2 days of relying on him. He gave her an encouraging nod. "Go on. Mary will take good care of you. I need to talk to Caleb for a bit, but I will be right here." Mary took Amelia's arm gently and led her toward the house, talking softly to her all the while. Owen watched them go, then turned to find his brother studying him with an expression that was equal parts amused and concerned. "All right," Caleb said. "Tell me what you have gotten yourself into this time." Owen sighed and began unsaddling Copper as he told his brother the story, starting with finding Amelia in the church and ending with their arrival at the ranch. Caleb listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as Owen explained about Gerald Thornton and Amelia's flight from her wedding. "So let me see if I have this straight," Caleb said when Owen finished. "You have essentially kidnapped a rancher's bride-to-be and brought her here, and now he might come looking for her." "I did not kidnap anyone," Owen protested. "She left of her own free will and I just helped her get to safety." "I know that," Caleb said. "But do you think Thornton is going to see it that way? If he is the kind of man you say he is, possessive and controlling, he is going to see this as someone taking what belongs to him, and he is going to be angry." Owen felt his jaw tighten. "Well, let him be angry. She is a person, not property, and she has the right to choose who she marries. If Thornton has a problem with that, he can take it up with me." Caleb was quiet for a moment, then he clapped Owen on the shoulder. "You have got it bad, brother," he said, not unkindly. "What are you talking about?" "For her, Miss Fletcher. You have got it bad for her." Owen wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in his throat. Was his brother right? Had he developed feelings for Amelia in the short time they had been together? It seemed impossible. They had only known each other for 2 days. But he could not deny the fierce protectiveness he felt toward her, or the way his heart had lifted when she smiled at him, or the way he had been acutely aware of her presence behind him on the horse, her arms around his waist and her breath warm against his back. "It does not matter," Owen said finally. "What matters is that she is safe and has a place to figure out what she wants to do next." "Of course she can stay here," Caleb said. "Mary would have my hide if I even suggested otherwise, but Owen, you need to be careful. If Thornton does come looking, this could get ugly, and I have Mary and the baby to think about." "I know," Owen said. "And if it comes to that, I will handle it. I will not let any trouble fall on you and your family." They finished tending to Copper and the other horses, then headed into the house. The smell of fresh bread and stew greeted them, making Owen's stomach growl with hunger. He realized he had barely eaten in the past 2 days, too focused on getting Amelia to safety to think much about his own needs. Mary had set Amelia up in the small guest room off the kitchen, and when Owen and Caleb entered, they could hear the sound of water splashing and Mary's soft voice offering Amelia clean clothes. Owen settled himself at the rough-hewn table and gratefully accepted the bowl of stew that Caleb ladled out for him. A short while later, Amelia emerged from the guest room, transformed. She wore one of Mary's dresses, a simple green cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and her hair had been washed and braided back from her face. The exhaustion was still there, carved into the lines around her mouth and the shadows under her eyes, but she looked more like herself, more solid and real. "Feeling better?" Owen asked as she took a seat at the table across from him. "Much," Amelia said. She accepted a bowl of stew from Mary with quiet thanks and began to eat. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the clinking of spoons against bowls and the crackling of the fire in the hearth. Finally, Mary spoke. "Amelia, Owen told us a bit about your situation. I want you to know that you are welcome here for as long as you need. We do not have much, but what we have, we are happy to share." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what that means to me. I will earn my keep, I promise. I can cook and clean and help with the animals. I do not want to be a burden." "You are not a burden," Mary said firmly. "And honestly, I could use the help. I'm getting too big to do a lot of the work around here, and Caleb and Owen have enough to do managing the ranch. Having another woman around will be a blessing." They talked late into the evening, Amelia slowly opening up about her life before her flight from Thornton's ranch. She told them about growing up as a rancher's daughter, learning to ride and rope and brand alongside her father. She told them about her mother's death in childbirth and her father's devotion to her, how he had taught her to read and write and do figures, skills that many ranch girls never learned. And she told them about the loneliness after her father died, the feeling of being adrift in the world with no anchor and no purpose. Owen found himself hanging on every word, learning more about the woman he had rescued from that church. She was not just beautiful, he realized, though she certainly was that. She was intelligent and capable and brave, and she had survived things that would have broken a lesser person. He admired her, he realized, and that admiration was quickly growing into something deeper and more complicated. Finally, Mary stood up, one hand pressed to the small of her back. "I think it is time we all got some rest," she announced. "Amelia, you will take the guest room. Owen, you can bunk with Caleb in the barn loft like you usually do when you visit." As everyone prepared for bed, Owen found himself alone with Amelia for a moment in the kitchen. She was washing the dishes, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she was too tired to do anything quickly. "You did well today," Owen said quietly. 2 days of hard riding is no easy thing, especially for someone who has not been on a horse in a while. Amelia gave him a small smile. "I had a good teacher," she said, "and good reason to keep going." They stood there in the warm kitchen, the silence stretching between them, full of things neither of them knew how to say. Finally, Owen cleared his throat. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow things will look better. Owen, Amelia said as he turned to leave. He looked back at her. Thank you for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay you. You do not need to repay me, Owen said. Just be safe and be happy. That is all I want. He left before she could respond, before he could see the look on her face or let himself say anything else he might regret. Out in the barn, Caleb was already settling into the hay in the loft, laying out their bedrolls. She is something special, Caleb observed as Owen climbed up to join him. She is, Owen agreed. So what are you going to do about it? Nothing, Owen said firmly. She just escaped from one man who wanted to control her. The last thing she needs is another man making demands on her. When she is ready, if she is ever interested, she will let me know. Until then, I am just going to make sure she is safe. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You know, for a man who has spent his whole life drifting from ranch to ranch, never staying in one place for more than a season, you are talking an awful lot about staying and protecting someone. Owen did not have an answer for that, so he just pulled his blanket over himself and closed his eyes, willing sleep to come. But it was a long time before he actually drifted off, his mind full of green eyes and auburn hair, and the memory of Amelia's arms around his waist as they rode through the desert together. The next few days fell into a comfortable routine. Owen and Caleb worked the ranch, mending fences and tending the small herd of cattle and horses that Caleb was slowly building up. Mary and Amelia worked in the house, cooking and cleaning and preserving the last of the summer vegetables from Mary's garden. In the evenings, they would all gather around the table for dinner, talking and laughing as the sun set beyond the windows. Owen found himself watching Amelia constantly, unable to help himself. He watched the way she moved through the kitchen with easy confidence, the way she laughed at Caleb's terrible jokes, the way she gently rubbed Mary's swollen feet in the evenings when the pregnant woman's ankles ached. He watched the way the light caught in her hair, and the way her face softened when she thought no one was looking. And he saw the way she watched him back, her eyes following him when she thought he was not paying attention. On the fourth day after their arrival, Owen was working in the corral breaking a young mare to the saddle when he heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. He looked up to see 3 riders coming down the valley toward the ranch, and his stomach tightened. Something about the way they rode, purposeful and aggressive, set off warning bells in his head. "Caleb," he called out. His brother emerged from the barn, saw the riders, and immediately went back inside to retrieve his rifle. Owen climbed out of the corral and walked toward the house, positioning himself between the approaching riders and the front door where he knew Amelia and Mary were inside. The riders pulled up in front of the house in a cloud of dust. The man in the center was well dressed for a rancher, with a fine leather vest and a silver banded hat. He was in his mid-30s, with a neatly trimmed beard and cold gray eyes that swept over the ranch with obvious disdain. Owen did not need to be told that this was Gerald Thornton. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Owen asked, keeping his voice neutral and his hands visible. Thornton ignored him, looking instead at the house. "I am looking for Amelia Fletcher," he said. "I have reason to believe she might be here." "Who is asking?" Owen said. "Gerald Thornton. Miss Fletcher is my fiancée, and she has been missing for several days. I am concerned for her safety." "That is interesting," Owen said, "because the way I heard it, Miss Fletcher left of her own free will and is not your fiancée anymore." Thornton's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I do not know who you are, stranger, but you are interfering in matters that do not concern you. Amelia is confused and frightened, and she needs to come home where she belongs." "The only place Amelia belongs is wherever she chooses to be," Owen said, his voice hardening. "And she has chosen not to be with you. I suggest you respect that choice and ride on." One of the other riders, a heavy-set man with a scar across his cheek, reached for his gun, but Caleb's voice rang out from the barn door. "I would not do that if I were you. I have got a rifle pointed at your back, and my brother is faster on the draw than anyone I have ever seen. So unless you want this to end badly, I suggest you keep your hands where we can see them." Thornton held up a hand, stopping his man from drawing. "This does not have to be unpleasant," he said, though his jaw was tight with anger. "I just want to talk to Amelia. If she tells me herself that she wants to stay here, then I will leave, but I need to hear it from her." Before Owen could respond, the front door of the house opened and Amelia stepped out onto the porch. She was pale but composed, her hands clenched in the folds of her borrowed dress. Mary stood behind her in the doorway, one hand resting on her belly. "Hello, Gerald," Amelia said, her voice steady. "You did not need to come all this way." Thornton's face transformed when he saw her, a smile spreading across his features that did not reach his eyes. "Amelia, thank God. I have been so worried about you. When you ran off on our wedding day, I thought something terrible had happened to you." "Nothing terrible happened," Amelia said. "I made a choice. I chose not to marry you." "You were nervous," Thornton said, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. "All brides get nervous, but we can work through this. Come home with me now and we can reschedule the wedding. I forgive you for running." "There is nothing to forgive," Amelia said, stepping forward until she stood beside Owen on the porch steps. "And I am not coming back with you. I heard what you said to your friend, Gerald, about how you had been waiting for my father to be out of the way, about how you saw me as a prize to be won. I will not marry a man who thinks of me like that." Thornton's expression hardened. "You overheard a private conversation and misunderstood what you heard. I loved your father like a brother, Amelia, and I love you. Everything I have done has been for your benefit." "No," Amelia said firmly. "Everything you have done has been for your benefit. You wanted a young wife to show off, someone you could control. But I am not that person, Gerald. I never was, and I never will be." Thornton's facade cracked, and Owen could see the anger burning in his eyes. "You ungrateful little fool," he spat. "Do you have any idea what I have done for you, how much I have invested in you? Your father's medical bills, your room and board after he died, the wedding preparations. You owe me, Amelia." "I owe you nothing," Amelia said. "You made those choices without asking me what I wanted. That is on you, not me." Thornton turned his cold gaze to Owen. "Is this who you have been warming your bed with? This drifter? Did he sweet-talk you into running away, fill your head with romantic nonsense?" Owen felt his temper flare, but before he could respond, Amelia's voice rang out, sharp and furious. "How dare you? Owen Xavier is a better man than you will ever be. He found me sleeping in a church with nowhere to go, and he helped me without asking for anything in return. He treated me with more respect in 2 days than you showed me in 6 months, so do not you dare speak about him that way." The air in the yard was thick with tension, and Owen could see Thornton's men shifting nervously in their saddles. This was the moment, he realized, where things could go very wrong. Thornton was a man who was not used to being defied, especially not by a woman he considered his property. Owen moved almost imperceptibly, placing himself between Amelia and the mounted men. "I think it is time for you to leave," Owen said quietly. "You have heard what Miss Fletcher has to say. She does not want to marry you and she does not want to go back with you. That is the end of it." Thornton stared at him for a long moment, and Owen could see him weighing his options, calculating whether he could take what he wanted by force. But then his eyes flickered to Caleb and the rifle still trained on his back, and to Owen's hand resting casually near his gun belt, and whatever he saw there made him reconsider. "This is not over," Thornton said. looking past Owen to Amelia. "You will regret this choice, Amelia. When you are penniless and alone with nowhere to turn, you will remember this day and wish you had been smarter. The only thing I will regret is ever agreeing to marry you in the first place," Amelia said. "Goodbye, Gerald." Thornton wheeled his horse around viciously, spurring it hard enough to make the animal rear slightly. His men followed suit, and the three of them thundered back up the valley the way they had come, leaving a cloud of dust hanging in the still air. For a long moment after they disappeared, no one moved. Then Amelia's legs buckled, and Owen caught her before she hit the ground, sweeping her up into his arms and carrying her into the house. He set her down gently on the sofa in the front room, and Mary immediately appeared with a cup of water and a cool cloth for her forehead. "That was very brave," Owen said, kneeling beside the sofa and taking Amelia's trembling hand in his. "But probably foolish. You made him very angry." "I do not care," Amelia said, though her voice shook. "I am tired of being afraid of him, tired of feeling like I have to apologize for wanting control over my own life. Maybe it was foolish, but it felt good to finally tell him the truth." Caleb came in from outside, setting his rifle carefully in the corner. "He will not come back," he said. "Men like that do not like being humiliated in front of witnesses. His pride will not let him try again, not here at least." "But you should be careful if you go into town," Mary added, her face worried. "Men like Gerald Thornton have long memories and ways of making people's lives difficult." "Then I will not go into town," Amelia said simply. "I will stay here and help you if you will let me. At least for a while, until I can figure out what to do next." Mary smiled and patted her shoulder. "Of course you can stay. We have already talked about this." Over the following weeks, life at the ranch settled into a new normal. Amelia proved to be an invaluable help to Mary, taking over many of the heavier chores as the pregnant woman's time drew nearer. She also surprised Owen and Caleb by demonstrating her skill with horses, working with the young animals in the corral with a patience and intuition that impressed even Caleb. Owen found himself falling deeper under her spell with each passing day. He loved the way she hummed while she worked, loved the way she challenged his opinions during dinner conversations, loved the way she threw her head back and laughed without reservation when something amused her. And he loved the way she looked at him, with a warmth and affection that made his heart stutter in his chest. But he kept his feelings to himself, mindful of his promise to let her make the first move if she was interested. She had been through enough, had her choices taken away from her enough. He would not add to that burden by pressing his own desires on her. One evening, about 3 weeks after Thornton's visit, Owen was working late in the barn, mending a broken bridle by lamplight. He heard soft footsteps behind him and turned to find Amelia standing in the doorway, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the cooling evening air. "It is late," he said. "You should be inside where it is warm." "I could say the same to you," Amelia replied, stepping into the barn and closing the door behind her. "May I sit with you for a while?" Owen nodded, his throat suddenly tight. Amelia settled herself on a bale of hay near his workbench, watching him work in comfortable silence for several minutes. Finally, she spoke. "I have been thinking a lot lately," she said, "about what I want, about what comes next for me, and I realized that I have spent my whole life letting other people make decisions for me. My father decided where we would live and what work I would do. Gerald decided that I would marry him. Even you and Mary and Caleb, as kind as you have been making decisions about what is best for me." Owen set down the bridle and looked at her, concerned. "If we have overstepped, I am sorry. That was never our intention." "No," Amelia said quickly. "That is not what I mean. You have all been wonderful and I am grateful. but I need to start making my own choices, deciding my own path, and I have decided something important." "What is that?" Owen asked, his heart beating faster. Amelia stood up and crossed the space between them, stopping so close to him that he could smell the lavender soap she had used in her bath. She looked up at him, her green eyes serious and determined. "I have decided that I care about you," she said simply. "Not because you saved me or because I owe you anything, but because you are a good man and you make me happy. And I have decided that I want to see where this could go between us, if you are interested." Owen felt like all the air had been knocked out of his lungs. "Amelia," he breathed. "Are you sure? You have been through so much and you are still recovering. I do not want you to feel like you have to say this or do this because you are grateful or because you think I expect it." "I am not saying it because of any of those reasons," Amelia said, reaching up to cup his cheek with her hand. "I am saying it because it is true. I care about you, Owen Xavier, and unless I have completely misread the situation, I think you care about me too." "I do," Owen admitted, covering her hand with his own. "I have cared about you since the moment I saw you sleeping in that church, looking so vulnerable and so strong all at the same time, but I did not want to push you or make you feel pressured." "You have never made me feel pressured," Amelia said softly. "You have only ever made me feel safe and valued and seen, and that is why I care about you." Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her close as she tucked her head under his chin. They stood there in the lamp-lit barn, just holding each other, letting the truth of what they had admitted settle over them like a blessing. "So what happens now?" Owen murmured against her hair. "Now we figure it out together," Amelia said. "One day at a time. No rushing, no pressure. Just two people getting to know each other and seeing where it leads." "I like the sound of that," Owen said. They stayed in the barn for a long time that night, talking about everything and nothing. Owen told her about his childhood, about his mother's strength and his brother's steady reliability. He told her about his years drifting from ranch to ranch, never quite finding a place he wanted to stay. And Amelia told him about her dreams, about wanting to have her own ranch someday, about wanting to breed horses and build something lasting. When they finally returned to the house, hand in hand, Mary took one look at them and smiled knowingly. "It is about time," she said. "I was beginning to think I was going to have to lock you two in a room together." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Owen's life. He and Amelia spent every spare moment together, riding out into the hills to check on the cattle, working side by side in the barn and the corral, sitting together on the porch in the evenings watching the sun set. They talked for hours about everything under the sun, learning each other's stories and dreams and fears. And slowly, carefully, they fell deeper in love. Caleb watched his brother's transformation with amusement and approval. "Never thought I would see the day," he told Owen one morning as they were saddling horses. Owen Xavier, the confirmed bachelor, finally settling down. "I have not settled down yet," Owen protested, but there was no heat in it. "Maybe not officially," Caleb said. "But you have got the look of a man who has found what he has been searching for, and I am happy for you, brother. Amelia is good for you." In late October, Mary went into labor, and Amelia proved her worth yet again by staying calm and helpful throughout the long night, assisting the midwife from the neighboring ranch and keeping Caleb from wearing a hole in the floor with his pacing. Just after dawn, a healthy baby girl was born with her mother's blonde hair and her father's blue eyes. They named her Rose, and when Amelia held her for the first time, Owen saw tears streaming down her face. "She is beautiful," Amelia whispered, cradling the tiny bundle with infinite gentleness. "Someday that will be you," Owen said quietly, standing beside her, "holding our child." Amelia looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Is that what you want, a future with me?" "More than anything," Owen said, "but only if it is what you want too." "It is," Amelia said, her voice full of wonder. "It really is." As autumn gave way to winter, Owen and Amelia continued to build their relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. There were no grand gestures or sweeping declarations, just the steady, daily choice to care for each other and to build something together. In December, as the first snow began to dust the hills around the ranch, Owen asked Amelia to marry him. They were standing in the barn, having just finished feeding the horses for the evening, and the proposal was not planned or rehearsed. It just felt right. "Amelia Fletcher," he said, taking both her hands in his. "I know we have not been together for very long, and I know you have reasons to be wary of marriage after what happened with Thornton. But I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Amelia did not hesitate. "Yes," she said, throwing her arms around his neck. "Yes, I will marry you, Owen Xavier." They were married in early January of 1883 in the same church in Mojave where Owen had first found her sleeping all those months ago. The town pastor, who remembered Amelia from her aborted wedding to Thornton, seemed delighted to perform a ceremony that was based on love rather than obligation. Caleb stood up as Owen's best man, and Mary, having recovered from Rose's birth, stood up for Amelia. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, and when Owen slipped the plain gold band onto Amelia's finger, he felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was where he was meant to be with this woman, building a life together. "I love you," he whispered as they exchanged their first kiss as husband and wife. "I love you too," Amelia whispered back. "Thank you for kneeling beside me that day and asking if I had a home. Thank you for giving me one." After the wedding, Owen and Amelia stayed at Caleb and Mary's ranch for a few more months, saving money and making plans. In the spring, they purchased a small piece of land about 20 miles north of Caleb's spread, near the California-Nevada border. It was not much, just 100 acres with a stream running through it and enough grazing for a small herd, but it was theirs. They built their house together, a sturdy log cabin with 2 rooms that they planned to expand as their family grew. They started with a dozen head of cattle and 3 good mares that Owen had selected with Amelia's expert eye guiding him. And slowly, painstakingly, they began to build the life they had both dreamed of. The work was hard, harder than anything either of them had ever done. There were days when Owen wondered if they had been foolish to think they could make a go of it with so little. But every time doubt crept in, he would look at Amelia, working beside him with dirt on her face and determination in her eyes, and he knew that they would make it work. Together, they could do anything. In the fall of 1883, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. Owen was beside himself with joy, already imagining a son or daughter with Amelia's green eyes and quick mind. But Amelia was more cautious, remembering how her own mother had died bringing her into the world. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked him one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her still flat belly. "Nothing is going to go wrong," Owen said firmly. "You are strong and healthy, and Mary has already agreed to come stay with us when your time comes. And I will be right there with you every step of the way." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in May of 1884, Amelia gave birth to a healthy baby boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's eyes. They named him Thomas after Owen's father, and Owen thought his heart would burst with love when he first held his son. "He is perfect," Owen said, marveling at the tiny fingers that wrapped around his thumb. "He is," Amelia agreed, looking exhausted but radiant. "We made a perfect little person." As Thomas grew, the ranch prospered. Owen proved to have a talent for breeding horses, and Amelia's skills at training them meant that they soon had a reputation for producing quality stock. People came from as far away as Los Angeles and Reno to buy their horses, and the small herd gradually grew into something substantial. 2 years after Thomas was born, Amelia had a daughter they named Sarah, with auburn curls like her mother. And 2 years after that, another son they called James, who proved to have his father's easy temperament and his mother's determination. Life was not always easy. There were droughts that tested their resources and harsh winters that claimed livestock. There were times when money was tight, and they had to make hard choices about what expenses to prioritize. But through it all, Owen and Amelia faced each challenge together, their love for each other deepening with every trial they overcame. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep, and they sat together on the porch of their now expanded house, watching the sun set over the mountains, Owen would sometimes think back to that morning in the church in Mojave. He would remember kneeling beside Amelia and asking if she had no home, never imagining that she would become his home, the center of his entire world. "What are you thinking about?" Amelia would ask, noticing the faraway look in his eyes. "Just how lucky I am," Owen would reply, pulling her close. "How incredibly, impossibly lucky." Amelia would smile and rest her head on his shoulder. "We are both lucky," she would say. "We found each other when we both needed it most." In the summer of 1892, 10 years after they first met, Owen and Amelia stood in the same spot where Owen had proposed, in the barn that was now twice the size it had been when they built it. Their ranch had grown to over 500 acres, and their herd numbered in the hundreds. Thomas, now 8 years old, was already showing promise as a horseman, and Sarah and James followed their older brother everywhere, determined to keep up. "You ever regret it?" Owen asked, pulling Amelia close. "Choosing this life, it has not been easy." Amelia looked up at him, her green eyes still as bright and fierce as they had been the day he found her in that church. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "You gave me a home when I had none, Owen, but more than that, you gave me a choice. You let me decide my own path, my own future. And I chose this. I chose you, and I would choose you again every day for the rest of my life." Owen kissed her then, deep and long, pouring 10 years of love and commitment into that single gesture. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. "Come on," Amelia said, taking his hand. "The children will be wondering where we are. Mary and Caleb are coming for dinner tonight, and I promised Sarah she could help me make the pie." They walked hand in hand back toward the house, where they could hear their children's laughter ringing out across the yard. Rose, now 10 years old herself, had come with her parents and was teaching Sarah and James how to play a game she had learned at school. That evening, as both families gathered around the expanded dining table, the house full of noise and love and laughter, Owen looked around at everything they had built. His brother and his best friend across the table, their children playing together, his wife beside him glowing with happiness and contentment. This was what mattered, he realized, not the land or the cattle or the money in the bank. This right here, family, love, home. Later, after Caleb and Mary had loaded a sleepy Rose into their wagon and headed back to their own ranch, after the children had been tucked into bed and the dishes had been washed and put away, Owen and Amelia stood together on their porch, looking up at the vast expanse of stars overhead. "I love you," Owen said, as he did every night. "I love you too," Amelia replied, as she always did. "Thank you for finding me that day. Thank you for asking me if I had a home. Thank you for giving me one." "You gave me a home too," Owen said. "Before I met you, I was just drifting. I did not know what I was looking for, but I knew I had not found it yet. And then I walked into that church and saw you sleeping there, and something in me just knew. You were what I had been searching for all along." They stood there in comfortable silence, wrapped in each other's arms as the night deepened around them. Inside the house, their children slept safely in their beds, dreaming whatever dreams children dream. And on the land they had built together through hard work and determination and love, their horses grazed peacefully under the watching stars. The years continued to pass, bringing new joys and new challenges. Thomas grew into a fine young man, taking over more and more of the ranch work as Owen began to feel his age in his joints and his back. Sarah proved to have her mother's gift with horses, and by the time she was 15, she could gentle the wildest colt with patience and kindness. James, the youngest, showed an unexpected talent for figures and business, helping his parents negotiate better prices for their stock and manage their accounts. In 1895, tragedy struck when Caleb was thrown from a horse and broke his back. He survived but was left unable to walk, confined to a wheelchair that Owen built for him with his own hands. The two families grew even closer during this difficult time, with Owen and Thomas helping to manage both ranches while Amelia and the girls helped Mary care for Caleb and keep their household running. But even in the midst of hardship, there was joy. Rose married a young rancher from a neighboring spread in 1896, and the families celebrated with a grand party that lasted 2 days. Thomas began courting the daughter of the preacher in Mojave, a sweet-natured girl named Elizabeth who fit into the family as if she had always been there. In 1897, on their 15th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Amelia with a trip to San Francisco. They had never been to a big city before, and the experience was both overwhelming and exhilarating. They stayed in a real hotel with running water and electric lights, saw a play at a grand theater, and walked along the waterfront holding hands like newlyweds. "This is wonderful," Amelia said as they stood on the deck of a ferry, watching the sun set over the bay. "But I miss home. I miss the children and the ranch and the quiet of the desert." "Me too," Owen admitted. "We have built a good life, have we not? The best life," Amelia agreed. "Better than I ever could have imagined sitting in that church all those years ago thinking my life was over." "Your life was not over," Owen said, pulling her close. "It was just beginning." They returned home to find that Thomas and Elizabeth had gotten engaged in their absence, and that Sarah had won first prize for her 3-year-old mare at the county fair in their absence. Life continued its steady march forward, bringing changes and growth and new beginnings. By 1900, as the century turned, and the world seemed to be racing toward a future full of motor cars and telephones and moving pictures, Owen and Amelia had become respected pillars of their community. Their ranch was one of the most successful in the region, their horses sought after throughout California and Nevada. But more than that, they had raised 3 good, kind, hardworking children who carried their values out into the world. Thomas and Elizabeth married in the spring of 1900 and began building a house on the far corner of Owen and Amelia's property, planning to take over the ranch eventually when Owen and Amelia were ready to retire. Sarah surprised everyone by announcing that she planned to attend a new agricultural college in the San Joaquin Valley, determined to learn the latest methods of horse breeding and ranch management. And James, at 15, was already showing signs of becoming a shrewd businessman, talking about opening a feed store in Mojave to serve the growing number of ranchers in the area. On a warm evening in June of 1901, almost 19 years to the day after Owen had found Amelia sleeping in that church, they sat together on their porch, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Owen was 50 now, his dark hair liberally streaked with gray, and Amelia was 41, with fine lines around her eyes that only made her more beautiful in his opinion. "You remember what you asked me that first day?" Amelia said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "I asked you if you had no home," Owen said, remembering. "And now look at us," Amelia said, gesturing to the house, the barn, the corrals, the land stretching out as far as they could see. "We built all of this together." "We did," Owen agreed, "and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Thomas came around the corner of the house then, leading his horse. "Pa, I am heading over to check on the north pasture. Some of the fence wire looked loose this morning. I should be back before dark." "Be careful," Owen called out, "and take James with you. He can help, and it is good for him to learn." They watched Thomas ride off, and a few minutes later James came running out of the barn, eager to catch up with his brother. Sarah emerged from the house, having helped her mother with dinner, and settled herself on the porch steps with a book. "This is what it is all about," Owen said quietly to Amelia. "This right here, family, home, the life we chose to build together." "It is," Amelia agreed, resting her head on his shoulder, "and I am so grateful for all of it for you." As the years continued to roll by, Owen and Amelia grew older together, their love deepening and maturing like fine wine. They celebrated their 20th anniversary in 1903, their 25th in 1908. They saw Thomas and Elizabeth welcome 3 children of their own, saw Sarah marry a fellow agricultural student and move to Northern California to start her own horse breeding operation, saw James open his feed store and then expand it into a general mercantile that served the entire region. Caleb passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1905, and Owen mourned the loss of his brother deeply. But Mary continued to be a close presence in their lives, eventually coming to live with Owen and Amelia when managing her own household became too difficult. By 1910, as Owen approached 60 and Amelia 50, they began to slow down, letting Thomas and Elizabeth take over more of the daily operations of the ranch. They spent their time with their grandchildren, teaching them to ride and telling them stories of the old days when the West was still wild and untamed. On a crisp autumn evening in October of 1912, exactly 30 years after Owen had found Amelia in that church, they took a ride together out to their favorite spot on the ranch, a high meadow where they could see for miles in every direction. They dismounted and stood together, Owen's arm around Amelia's waist, looking out at the land they had tamed and loved. 30 years, Amelia said wonderingly. "Has it really been 30 years?" "It has," Owen said, "and I would not change a single day of it. Well, maybe some of the harder days. But even those taught us something, made us stronger." "Do you ever think about that morning?" Amelia asked. "When you found me in the church all the time," Owen admitted. "I think about how close I came to just riding past to not stopping at all, and then where would we be?" "You would have found someone else to love," Amelia said, "and I would have figured something out." "Maybe," Owen said, "but I do not think I would have ever found someone I loved as much as I love you. You are my home, Amelia. You always have been." Amelia turned in his arms and kissed him, deeply and sweetly. When they pulled apart, both of them had tears in their eyes. "You are my home too," she said. "You gave me that gift 30 years ago when you knelt beside me and asked if I had nowhere to go. You gave me a home and a future and a love I never dreamed possible. Thank you for that. Thank you for everything." They stood there in the meadow as the sun set, holding each other close, surrounded by the land they had built together and the legacy they would leave to their children and grandchildren. And as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Owen thought about all the twists and turns that had brought him to that church in Mojave on that September morning in 1882. He had been looking for water for his horse and a moment of quiet. What he had found instead was his destiny, sleeping in a ruined wedding dress, lost and alone and desperately in need of someone to ask if she had a home. And in giving her that home, she had given him one in return. It was a fair trade, Owen thought, pulling Amelia closer. The fairest trade that had ever been made. As the years advanced into the mid-19-teens, Owen and Amelia truly entered their golden years. They were grandparents now to 8 grandchildren, with a 9th on the way. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's capable management, and Sarah's breeding program in the north had gained national recognition. James had expanded his business interests to include a bank and a shipping concern, making him one of the most prosperous merchants in the Mojave region. But for Owen and Amelia, the greatest joy was simply being together, watching their family grow and thrive, knowing that they had built something that would last long after they were gone. They spent their days doing small chores around the house, riding out to check on the horses, and sitting on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over the mountains they had called home for more than 3 decades. In the summer of 1917, they celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with a grand party that brought together the entire extended family. Children and grandchildren came from as far away as Sacramento and as near as the neighboring ranch. There was music and dancing, food enough to feed an army, and speeches that brought tears and laughter in equal measure. As Owen and Amelia danced together under the stars, moving slowly to a waltz that the band played just for them, Owen looked down at his wife and marveled at how beautiful she still was. Her hair was silver now, and her face bore the lines of a life well lived, but her green eyes were as bright and fierce as ever. "What are you thinking?" Amelia asked, smiling up at him. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest man who ever lived," Owen said. "And I am thinking about that scared young woman I found sleeping in a church 35 years ago, and how she became the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. That scared young woman is still inside me somewhere," Amelia admitted, "but she is not scared anymore. Because she has you, and she has this family, and she has this life we built together. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything." They danced until the stars wheeled overhead and the grandchildren fell asleep in their parents' laps. And then they finally retired to their room, exhausted but happy, falling asleep in each other's arms as they had every night for 35 years. As Owen drifted off to sleep, he sent up a silent prayer of thanks for that September morning in 1882, when he had decided to stop at a church in Mojave looking for water. He thanked God for guiding his steps to that door, for giving him the courage to kneel beside a sleeping stranger and ask if she had no home. Because that single moment of compassion had changed both their lives forever, had set them on a path that led to more love and joy than either of them had ever imagined possible. And in the morning, when they woke up together to the sound of their grandchildren playing in the yard and the smell of breakfast cooking in the kitchen, they would begin another day of their shared life, another day of building memories and loving each other and being grateful for the home they had created together. Because that was what mattered most in the end, not the land or the money or the success, just the simple, profound gift of having someone to love and to be loved by in return. Just the knowledge that no matter what challenges life brought, they would face them together. Just the peace of knowing that they had found their home in each other. And it all started with a cowboy kneeling beside a sleeping bride in a church, asking a simple question that would change both their lives forever. "Have you no home?" Years continued their steady march, bringing the inevitable changes that time brings to all. In 1920, Mary passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her daughter Rose and her grandchildren. Owen and Amelia grieved the loss of the woman who had welcomed Amelia into her home without hesitation all those years ago. But they took comfort in knowing that Mary had lived a full life, rich with love and family. By 1922, Owen was 70 years old and Amelia was 61. Their bodies were slower now, their movements more careful, but their minds were sharp, and their love for each other had only grown deeper with time. They spent most of their days in comfortable routines, tending the small garden Amelia had planted near the house, sitting in the shade reading to each other, and entertaining the seemingly endless stream of grandchildren and now great-grandchildren who came to visit. Thomas ran the ranch with the same steady hand that his father had used to build it, and he often sought Owen's counsel on difficult decisions. Sarah visited twice a year, bringing her children and regaling her parents with stories of her successes in the horse-breeding world. James had become a prominent businessman and town councilman in Mojave, working to bring modern amenities like electricity and telephone lines to the region. On a golden afternoon in September of 1922, exactly 40 years after Owen had found Amelia in that church, they sat together on their porch, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. Owen held Amelia's hand in his, marveling as he always did at how perfectly her hand fit in his. 40 years, he said, shaking his head in wonder. Where did the time go? It went into this, Amelia said, gesturing to the children playing, the thriving ranch around them, the life they had built. Every moment of those 40 years went into creating something beautiful, something lasting. Do you have any regrets? Owen asked, as he sometimes did. Only one, Amelia said, and Owen looked at her in surprise. She so rarely expressed regret about anything. I regret that we do not have another 40 years ahead of us. I regret that there will come a day when one of us has to say goodbye to the other. But as for how we have spent the years we have had, no, my love, no regrets at all. Owen raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I feel the same way. These have been the best years of my life, every single one of them, and it is all because of you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in its evening colors, listening to the laughter of their descendants. And Owen thought about how different his life might have been if he had not stopped at that church, if he had just ridden on past and never met the woman who would become the center of his world. But he had stopped. He had walked through that door and found his destiny sleeping on a wooden pew. He had knelt beside her and asked a question that came from genuine concern and compassion. And that single moment of human kindness had rippled out through time, creating a family, a legacy, a love story that would be told for generations to come. As the last light faded from the sky and Thomas came to help them inside for dinner, Owen took one last look around at everything they had built. The house that had started as 2 rooms and now sprawled across a hillside, the barns and corrals full of fine horses, the land that stretched as far as the eye could see, green and productive and beautiful. But most of all, he looked at Amelia, his wife, his partner, his home. I love you, he said, as he had said countless times over the past 40 years. I love you too, she replied, as she always did. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for asking if I had a home. Thank you for giving me the greatest life I could have ever imagined. Thank you for saying yes, Owen replied. Thank you for taking a chance on a drifting cowboy who did not know what he was looking for until he found you. Thank you for building this life with me. They walked inside together, arm in arm, to join their family for dinner. And as they took their seats at the head of the long table, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they shared a look that said everything words could not express. This was home. This was love. This was everything that mattered. And it had all started with a simple question, asked with a kind heart, on a September morning 40 years ago in a small church in Mojave, California. As the evening wore on, and the family gathered around them, sharing stories and laughter and love, Owen and Amelia held hands under the table, their fingers intertwined as they had been for 4 decades. And they knew, with the certainty that comes from a life well lived and a love well nurtured, that their story would continue long after they were gone. It would continue in their children, who had learned from their example what it meant to love completely and work tirelessly for what you believe in. It would continue in their grandchildren, who would tell their own children about the great-grandmother who had once run away from a wedding in a ruined dress, and the great-grandfather who had found her and given her a home. It would continue in the land they had loved and tended, in the horses they had bred and trained, in the community they had helped to build. But most of all, it would continue as a testament to the transformative power of compassion, of kindness, of one person seeing another person in need and choosing to help without expectation of reward. That was the real legacy of Owen and Amelia Xavier. Not the land or the wealth or the success, but the proof that one moment of genuine human decency could change 2 lives forever and ripple out to touch countless others. As the night deepened and the family began to head home, promising to visit again soon, Owen and Amelia prepared for bed in the room they had shared for nearly 40 years. They moved through their evening routine with the ease of long practice, helping each other with buttons and clasps that fingers made clumsy by age struggled with. When they finally climbed into bed, Owen pulled Amelia close and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It was slower now than it had been 40 years ago, but it was still strong, still faithful, still hers. "Good night, my love," Owen whispered into her hair. "Good night," Amelia whispered back. "See you in the morning." And they fell asleep together as they had every night for 40 years, secure in the knowledge that they had lived well and loved deeply. They had taken the broken pieces of their lives on that September morning in 1882 and forged them into something beautiful, something lasting, something worth celebrating. They had found each other when both of them needed finding, and in finding each other, they had found home.